12 American warships, 48 hours of coordinated encirclement, the largest maritime standoff in the South China Sea since World War II, and Washington just blinked. If that doesn't tell you something fundamental shifted in the Pacific power balance, nothing will. Because what happened 200 miles west of the Philippines over the past 2 days isn't just a naval incident. It's a message written in steel and seawater about who actually controls the world's most important shipping lane. And the bill for what comes next gets passed directly to you at the gas pump, the grocery store, and every supply chain touching your life. This channel runs on no corporate funding, no government backing, and no advertising pressure telling us what to leave out. If this kind of analysis matters to you, the kind that connects dots mainstream outlets won't, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Because what I'm about to show you explains the next 5 years of American foreign policy better than any official briefing ever will. Here's what happened. On April 19th at 0400 local time, the USS Carl Vinson Carrier Strike Group, 12 vessels total including 2 guided missile destroyers, 1 nuclear attack submarine and support craft, entered what the U.S. Navy calls international waters in the South China Sea. Standard freedom of navigation operation, happens monthly. Except this time, the People's Liberation Army Navy was waiting. Not with warnings. Not with surveillance ships shadowing at a distance. With 87 surface vessels forming a coordinated perimeter that boxed the American flotilla into a 40-square-mile operating area. 87 ships. Let that number sit for a second. The United States Navy operates 296 deployable battle force ships total across every ocean on Earth. China just put 87 vessels, nearly a third of the U.S. Navy's global strength, into one tactical formation in one body of water in one operational window. The maritime equivalent of showing up to a knife fight with a mechanized division. The Pentagon's initial statement called it a routine encounter. The word routine appeared 3 times in a 4-sentence release. But here's what the official narrative won't tell you. American ships were electronically isolated. GPS jamming created navigational drift of up to 300 meters. Satellite communications experienced unexplained latency spikes, reaching 4.7 seconds. For 48 hours, the most advanced carrier strike group in human history was operating partially blind inside a foreign-controlled perimeter with degraded command and control. That's not routine. That's a technological demonstration wrapped inside a territorial assertion. And then came the part that changes everything. The USS Carl Vinson received direct communication from the Chinese Southern Theater Command. Not a warning to leave, an instruction. Specific coordinates where the carrier group was permitted to exit the encirclement zone. 3 narrow corridors. 72-hour window. Non-negotiable terms delivered to a United States aircraft carrier operating under the flag of the nation that supposedly controlled Pacific sea lanes since 1945. China didn't ask the U.S. Navy to leave. China told the U.S. Navy where it was allowed to go. The carrier group took the exit corridor. 41 hours after encirclement began, American warships sailed through the coordinates Beijing provided and headed east toward open ocean. No shots fired, no collisions. No dramatic confrontation that makes cable news. Just 12 American vessels doing exactly what they were told by a foreign military inside waters Washington insists are international. The Pentagon called it de-escalation. The rest of the world calls it something else. Now here's the dimension almost nobody is discussing. This wasn't improvisation. This was a carefully engineered demonstration of multi-domain denial capability that required months of preparation and real-time coordination across 87 surface platforms. To maintain a stable perimeter around a moving carrier group for 48 hours, while simultaneously jamming GPS and degrading satellite links, you need integrated command and control at a level the U.S. Navy assumed China wouldn't achieve until 2030. That timeline just collapsed by 6 years in a single weekend. The technical capability on display here rewrites threat assessments across every Allied capital. Japan is watching a U.S. carrier group accept Chinese corridor instructions 400 miles from Japanese territorial waters. South Korea is calculating what this means for the 7th Fleet's ability to operate freely during a peninsula crisis. Taiwan is looking at 87 Chinese vessels moving in coordinated formation and doing math about how long American reinforcements could actually reach the island if Beijing makes the call. Every U.S. defense treaty in the Pacific just became a more expensive promise to keep because the operational assumption underneath all of them, American naval supremacy as a given, no longer holds the way it did 72 hours ago. Let me show you the math that makes this unsustainable. China operates 340 battle force ships. The United States operates 296. That's a 15% numerical advantage for China, but the real asymmetry lives in production capacity and geographic concentration. China builds 23 major surface combatants per year. The United States builds 8. In a sustained naval competition, one side adds 3 ships for every one the other side launches. That gap compounds. It doesn't close. But here's where it gets brutal. The U.S. Navy is a global force. 70 ships in the Pacific, 60 in the Atlantic and Mediterranean, 40 supporting CENTCOM operations, the rest in maintenance or transit. At any given moment, the available Pacific presence maxes out around 90 vessels, spread across an ocean that covers 63 million square miles. China's entire fleet operates in one theater. When Beijing wants local superiority, it doesn't deploy globally, it concentrates regionally. 87 ships in the South China Sea isn't a global deployment. It's Tuesday afternoon for the planned Southern Theater Command. The cost structure is equally lopsided. Each American Arleigh Burke-class destroyer costs $2.4 billion and takes 4 years to build. China's Type 052D destroyer costs $850 million and takes 26 months. The U.S. Navy operates 73 Burkes. China operates 25 Type 052Ds and is building them at a rate that adds 6 per year. Simple math says by 2028, China has more modern destroyers in the Pacific than the United States has globally. Not parity. Local superiority, backed by industrial throughput that America can't match without doubling shipyard capacity that doesn't exist. Now pull back and look at the geopolitical chessboard. Russia is watching this very carefully and with considerable satisfaction. Every hour of American strategic attention consumed by Pacific naval standoffs is an hour that reduces focus on Ukraine, NATO expansion, and European security guarantees. Moscow doesn't need to act. It benefits passively from Beijing's assertiveness, creating a two-theater problem Washington can't resource simultaneously at previous commitment levels. Beijing's own calculations just shifted. For 3 decades, the core constraint on Chinese regional ambitions was the assumption that the U.S. Navy could intervene decisively in any Taiwan contingency with carrier-based air power and subsurface dominance. What happened this week demonstrated that assumption has a ceiling. If 87 surface ships can box in a carrier strike group for 48 hours, with electronic warfare creating navigational chaos, that same capability applies during a Taiwan scenario. It means Chinese planners now have operational proof that they can create A2AD bubbles, anti-access area denial zones, that degrade American power projection enough to matter, not eliminate it, complicate it, delay it, make it expensive enough that Washington might choose not to pay the price. And here's the angle that should worry every strategist in Brussels and Tokyo. China didn't do this alone. The electronic warfare signature degrading U.S. satellite communications matches technical profiles previously observed during Russian operations in Syria. That's not coincidence. That's technology transfer. It means the integrated denial capability Beijing demonstrated this weekend potentially exists in Russian hands for Baltic or Black Sea scenarios. What worked against the USS Carl Vinson in the South China Sea works against NATO task forces in the Norwegian Sea or Eastern Mediterranean. The toolkit just proliferated. The dollar implications hit faster than most people realize. 60% of global liquefied natural gas transits the South China Sea, 40% of all container shipping. If Beijing can credibly demonstrate the ability to control access corridors, even when the U.S. Navy is present, insurance rates for commercial traffic just recalibrated. Lloyd's of London already issued preliminary guidance suggesting a 12 to 18% risk premium increase for vessels transiting contested zones. That cost gets passed to shippers. Shippers pass it to retailers. Retailers pass it to you. A Chinese naval demonstration 7,000 miles from California just added $40 to the cost of a flat-screen TV and 8 cents to a gallon of milk because global supply chain risk pricing changed in real time. What burned into the operational consciousness of every allied navy this week is not that China won a confrontation. It's that the United States chose to de-escalate under terms Beijing dictated. That decision, taking the exit corridor, accepting the 72-hour timeline, sailing where told, creates precedent. The next time this happens, and it will happen again because now China knows the playbook works, the diplomatic cost of not complying gets higher. Each successful encirclement operation becomes the new baseline for acceptable behavior. Salami slicing. Not taking the whole ocean at once. Just one procedural concession at a time until the accumulated surrenders add up to de facto Chinese control, without a single shot fired. Here are my 3 predictions with clocks attached. 1. Within 90 days, China conducts a larger encirclement operation involving 120-plus vessels around a different U.S. Navy asset to test escalation limits. 2. Before the end of 2026, at least one Asian ally, my money is on the Philippines or Thailand, publicly signals reduced confidence in U.S. security guarantees and begins direct security dialogue with Beijing. 3. Within 18 months, commercial shipping insurers require Chinese-approved transit corridors for South China Sea crossings, effectively privatizing Beijing's territorial claims through market mechanisms. The strategic question that matters now is whether Washington has the industrial base, the budget, and the political will to compete in a sustained naval arms race against an adversary that builds ships 3 times faster, at 1/3 the cost. The math says no. The rhetoric says yes. Which one you believe determines whether you think this standoff was an aberration or a preview. Drop your prediction in the comments. Does the U.S. Navy maintain freedom of navigation? Does China formalize control through repeated encirclement operations? Or does Washington quietly cede the South China Sea while pretending it didn't? Tell me, because I read every single one. If this gave you a framework for understanding what just shifted in the Pacific, something mainstream coverage treated as a minor incident, share it with one person who needs to see past the official narrative. The next video goes somewhere even this one didn't reach, the economic warfare dimension that makes military confrontation almost irrelevant. Subscribe so you're there when it drops.